Hi, everybody. My name is Carla Molento, and I am very happy to be here with you, at least with this kind of interaction. Our idea was that I would be physically teaching this class to you during my stay in Pisa. However, it was not possible because, due to the pandemic, I had to come back earlier to Brazil. But it is my pleasure to approach the issue of animal welfare assessment with you. And for this, I have to thank a very special thank you to Professor Chiara Mariti, Professor Angelo Gazzano, and also professors who were very important for my stay in Italy, Professor Stefania Perrucci and Alessandra Colli. I work at the Federal University of Paraná in the south of Brazil, and I run the Animal Welfare Laboratory. Our main topics of research are related to animal welfare assessment, and we've been involved in developing a protocol to assess animal mistreatment. So this is what I want to talk to you about today. So first, I would like to tell you a little bit of the story behind this work. Why are we, as an animal welfare laboratory, working with animal mistreatment? And then just a very short, brief review on two concepts that are very important to work with animal welfare. And these are the concept of animal welfare itself, but also the concept of animal sentience. And then to make this link between animal welfare assessment and crimes of animal abuse, we need to talk a little bit about the legal basis for animal protection, but this will be short. And then the most detailed part of our talk will be regarding animal welfare assessment itself. I'll be talking about protocols, the first ones that were developed and how they evolved and how come we ended up being able to have a protocol for the assessment of mistreatment. And this specific protocol is called Protocol for Expert Report in Animal Welfare, this here. And I hope we'll be able to talk with much detail about it. So the reason why we got engaged with the issues of animal welfare abuse and animal abuse and animal mistreatment were actually not a decision, an intentional decision that we took. Actually, the police started requesting us to give reports in different cases, and we ended up realizing that there were some challenges to do this and that science could help these activities. So just a little bit of the story, just the two first requests that we got to set up the stage. In 2008, the environmental police of the state of Paraná, where we are, requested our help for a case that involved 5 lions that were kept in a circus. This circus was in a town nearby, Curitiba, where we are. And we went there and we were not sure how we were going to make the report, but we decided to use conventional animal welfare assessment rationale. So we did this first report, and it did look like it had good power to discriminate abuse situations. So this was a request by the environmental police of the state of Paraná. And the state of Paraná is right here. So this is South America, map of South America, and then showing the area of Brazil. It's almost half of South America in territory as well as in population. And here where the axis is the city of Curitiba, where we are. And right on top of the state of Paraná, further north, is the state of São Paulo, to which I will be referring to as well. So Paraná is in the southern region of Brazil, is one of the 3 states in the southern region of Brazil, and São Paulo is southeast, together with Rio, which is approximately here. And these are probably places where you've already heard about. So this is the historical building of the Federal University of Paraná, one of the campus of our university here. You're all welcome to come and visit us. So the second case was the case of Bambi. Bambi is a female elephant, and she became sort of our mascot for this work, for this line of research. We were asked to help in the evaluation of her situation because an animal protection NGO had filed a complaint, and the environmental police again was not sure how to approach the case, so they requested our help, and we built again a report based on animal welfare assessment, and it supported a complete change in the life of Bambi. She was seized and she was taken from the circus where she was to was not exactly a zoo, but kind of a sanctuary because it's not open to the public. But anyways, it's an enclosure of 42,000 square meters where two other female elephants were living. And then Bambi arrived because we were able to get her from the very difficult situation she was living in. So this is Bambi. This is a picture of the place when we arrived for the assessment. So this is year 2009. And this is the back area of the place where the circus was, because in 2007, so before we had this case, our city passed a law, a municipal law, so it's only valid for the city, not for the country, forbidding the use of wild animals in circuses. So she could not be used during presentations. So the circus kept her in the backstage, in this trailer. She was living in this trailer for decades when we first met her. And so we applied the animal welfare assessment to produce the report. This is another view of the area where she was living. And with our results, we were able to conclude that her situation was really a situation of mistreatment. And then she was taken to this sanctuary. And this is I hope it works. Yes, it does. This is a short video of her arrival when we got to the zoo where she's living up to today. So she was a bit apprehensive because she didn't know the people around her. Although her trainer did help us and went with us through the whole trip and helped us taking her to her definitive place. So this is Maria Clara. She's used to be a student, and then when we did this work, she was already working at the environmental agency of the state. Okay, so just to show you a little further, I don't think we need to see the whole video, but she was hesitant to come out. She finally did. And we used something she really likes to make her help us in getting her to where she needed to go. So we gave her lots of apples and she finally got to where we wanted her to be. It might be that well, this is not working so well, so let's move forward. So this is a picture of the enclosures and her two friends there. So at this point, they didn't know each other, so we decided we would introduce Bambi through a wooden wall to see how, she would be received by her new companions. So the moment they saw her, they came and they approached. On both sides, they tried to touch each other, and it was clearly a very gentle reception. So we changed our minds. In the beginning, we thought Bambi should stay separate for a couple of days, but it just took us 2 days to put them together because they were really friendly towards each other. And so this is where Bambi lives up to today. So then, because of this requests that were coming again and again, and then they started coming from other states as well, not only the state of Paraná, we decided to do some kind of more standardized support for anyone who needed to write these kind of reports. So first thing, we tried to organize our thoughts around what the difficulties were. Why was it so difficult for anyone to go and help with such requests? So the first thing that we realized that was very important is to recognize that clinical exam is not sufficient. So a regular veterinary clinical exam won't do for this kind of situations. And I will explain why in just a second. The second thing that we realized was a major difficulty was the fact that veterinarians tended to write reports with medical terms and leave the issue of animal abuse or animal mistreatment open. So when these reports arrived on the hands of a judge, for example, it was very difficult for this person to decide. So we thought that veterinarians are in a very good position to suggest a final decision because of our knowledge in relation to the animals. So these are the two major difficulties that we tried to contribute to by publishing an animal welfare assessment protocol, which is specific for cases of suspicion of animal mistreatment. So why is a veterinary clinical exam not enough? And this is something we state because it has happened before. It used to be the common practice, and it used to leave the situations in a sort of a frustrating step. So that even some lawyers were saying that it was not helpful to call veterinarians to help in such cases, okay? What was going on, not only in Brazil, but in many places, was that to report on an animal abuse complaint, veterinarians were doing just a clinical exam. And so they were looking at the physical aspects of the animal, things such as nutrition and diseases and injuries, basically. So when veterinarians did not find any of these, they would write a report saying that the animal was well and probably there was no mistreatment involved. But this was very frequently questioned by those involved, especially by those making the complaints. For instance, in a case such as this one, let's suppose that we do a physical exam and we do not find any problems in terms of diseases or physical injuries. Can we really write a report saying that this animal is okay? And when that was done, it was not very accepted by those involved in the case. So what is lacking? What's the problem there? And when we come to think about it, the question there is exactly the reason for the development of animal welfare science, which is a science based in three aspects. Not only the physical, of course, physical aspects are very important for animal welfare. However, you also need to make assessments related to the natural behavior of the animal. Okay, so this concept of naturalness has to do with the animal being able to express normal behavior, natural behavior for that species, which is typical then for that animal. And we also need to try to have some kind of assessment, even though it's usually indirect, but we need to understand what is the psychological state of the animal. What are the predominant feelings? Is the animal in fear? Is the animal anxious about something? So we want to understand what feelings predominate for that animal. So when we think about this, we are talking about really the concept of animal welfare, okay? So we need to look at these three different types of indicators to be sure we have a complete animal welfare assessment. And when we do that, we include issues that were kept out when the reports were only based on clinical exam. So to do this, the first thing, of course, is to recognize that animals are sentient, and these are, although it's pretty logical to think this way, it's relatively recent in veterinary literature that sentience is approached, and even that we have some publications to give some guidance on what are the animals that are sentient. Are all animals sentient? So, what we have now as a guideline from the scientific literature is that all vertebrates are sentient. So, that is to say, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish, including fish. These are all taxonomic group of animals that are sentient, as well as some invertebrates that are making their way into the recognition of sentience as well, such as the cephalopods and the crustaceans. I am pretty sure that the list of animals that are considered sentient will increase with time as we learn more about the capacities, the cognitive capacities of different groups of animals. So whenever we are in face of a sentient animal, there is relevance for an animal welfare assessment, which also includes behavioral indicators as well as psychological indicators. And this recognition of sentience is based mostly on five different categories of evidences. The first one is more of the humanities, which is the fact that we, one way or another, most of us recognize that animals are sentient. That's common sense. We talk about a dog or a cat or a lion or many different animals as if they were sentient. So there may be something in that type of natural relationship that we have with animals. But then we have four other categories for the cumulative theory of sentience that are more scientific in the natural science, let's say, which are the behavioral evidences. The animals behave as if they had feelings. The neuroanatomic evidences, many animals share with humans even the same neurological nuclei that control feelings in the human central nervous system. So they are probably there in the animals doing their function as well. There are pharmacological evidences. So we know, for instance, that painkillers will work with animals. So that means that probably they have pain, they feel pain. And other drugs, just the same. If we think about the development of anti-anxiety drugs or antidepressive drugs, they were all tested in animals. So, of course, we cannot deny that rodents, for instance, are capable of developing depression, anxiety, and other feelings as those, okay? And there are the evolutive evidences as well, which is another category, a different approach, but that will lead us to the same type of conclusion, which is the fact that feelings give survival advantages. That's why they appeared and they were fixed in so many different species. It wouldn't be very reasonable to think that there was, during evolution, no species were able of any feelings, and then suddenly all this complexity, which is the feelings in humans, appeared from nowhere. Even Darwin, as early as 1871, he published a book exclusively on emotions in man and other animals. So it's pretty solid, the fact that the evolution recognizes feelings in animals. So this is just a touch of the very, very interesting area of the distribution of sentience in the animal kingdom. And there's lots of stuff now, of papers and books, which we can refer to if we want to know more detail about this knowledge. Okay, so how do we approach an animal welfare assessment then? Well, it's not only physical exam, okay? It has to do with behavior and mental predominance of feelings. So how do we approach that? And it's good to know that many researchers have thought about this and many papers have been published. So there are now some protocols for animal welfare assessment which are very consolidated, and they've been in use for years now. So you can have some structure. We do not need to start from zero, okay? Most protocols for the assessment of animal welfare will have 4 groups of indicators or 4 principles, or some of the protocols change the words, but the idea is the same. There are 4 categories of things, of indicators that we should be looking at. And these 4 categories are nutrition, health. So nutrition and health, let's say, could be combined to understand the physical exam. But then you have the comfort category, which is about how comfortable the housing of the animal is. And then you have the behavioral indicators. So there are 4 different types of indicators that we should be sure to include in an animal welfare assessment. And these come from the concept of the 5 freedoms, which probably you've heard about already. Okay, this is a concept that was first, well, it goes back to the Brambles Committee in the 60s, but then it was published in a format similar to what we are using today by the Farm Animal Welfare Council in 1993 in the United Kingdom. So the 5 freedoms are freedom from prolonged thirst and hunger, freedom from pain, disease, and injury, freedom from discomfort, freedom to perform natural behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. So how come we have 5 freedoms and then 4 groups of indicators? Well, the reason for that is because the freedom to perform natural behavior and the freedom from fear and distress, they both fall under the behavioral indicators group. Because in order to understand fear, for instance, we look at behavioral responses from the animal, okay? So that's why we have 5 freedoms and we have 4 groups of indicators. So to show you an example of the structure of animal welfare assessment protocols, I will show just 2 pages from the the welfare quality protocol, sorry. So the protocol is called welfare quality, okay? And the way the researchers that made part of that effort to produce the welfare quality protocols, the way they organize the indicators was so thoughtful and so effective that it is the way we use up to today, okay? So they've organized these 4 principles we've been talking about. So the 4 principles where you have nutrition, health, you have comfort, and then you have behavior, which would include 2 freedoms, the freedom from fear and distress and the freedom to perform regular behavior, okay? Natural behavior. So you have 4 principles. In order for you or for us to learn about these 4 principles, we have to look at specific criteria. So each principle will have more than 1 criteria. On average, there will be 12 criteria that you should look at to understand these 4 principles, okay? Now, another level of approaching the animal welfare assessment is the fact that for each criteria, you may have more than 1, you usually have more than 1 indicator, okay? So when I say indicator is what you effectively measure when you go on field, okay? Be it a farm or an animal mistreatment suspicion case or a laboratory, wherever you want to assess animal welfare, you're going to be measuring indicators. These indicators will be grouped into criteria, and these criteria will be grouped into 4 principles. Okay, so this is the overall structure of animal welfare assessment. And just to give a more detailed example, this is one of the tables. It's adapted from the tables from the welfare quality protocols. And what you see here is the 4 principles. So the wording may differ from one protocol to the other. So instead of calling here the nutrition group of indicators, for instance, they call it good feeding, but you'll see that the idea is just the same. Okay, so good feeding, which is about nutrition, good housing, which is about comfort, good health, which is about a regular clinical exam of the animal, and appropriate behavior, which is about natural behavior and freedom from fear and distress. Okay, so these are the 4 principles. Now, for each principle, you'll have more than one criteria. So if we take feeding as an example, we'll see that to understand good feeding, I should look at 2 criteria. One is absence of prolonged hunger. The other one is absence of prolonged thirst. Okay? And now, how do I measure absence of prolonged hunger on field? Then we are going to go down to the indicator level. Okay? So there are usually more than one indicator. There is more than one indicator for each criteria. As we are talking as an example about hunger, how do I measure hunger on field? Well, we have indicators that are based on the environment. So in this case, is there food for the animal? What's the quality of the food? What is the quantity that is offered for the animal? Is it enough? Is it adequate in such a way that it won't produce deficiencies? And there are indicators that you measure on the animal. They are called animal-based indicators. So in this case of hunger, for instance, the indicator that we would look into is the body condition score. It will tell us if the animal has been nourished, at least in terms of energy, for not just today, but a period previous to our assessment. Okay, so then you combine various indicators, which are numbers and things that you measure that are very objective. You combine them to understand what's the level for every criterion, and then you combine criteria 2, 3, 4, depending on the principle, to understand what's the level of the principle. So this is the rationale behind all protocols for animal welfare assessment. So these are the first ones. They made history. These are the welfare quality protocols. They were supported financially to help us understand living conditions for animals involved in production, food production. So the major species were approached, okay? Cattle, poultry, both broiler chickens and laying hens, and the welfare quality for pigs, because these are the 3 animal food production chains that involve the biggest number of animals. Well, not counting fish, but fish is a different story. It's much more recent. So we're still developing protocols for fish, okay? Then after the welfare quality initiative, we had this follow-up, again with financial support from the European Union, and these are the AWIN protocols. AWIN stands for Animal Welfare Indicators, okay? And these protocols were designed to further understand living conditions of, again, farm animals and some work animals, okay? So you have the AWIN protocol for the assessment of welfare in turkeys, donkeys, horses, sheep, and goats. Again, okay, there are differences, but the rationale is the same as the one you would find in the welfare quality protocols. And then finally, the one we want to talk with a little bit more detail is the protocol for expert report in animal welfare to be used in cases of suspicion of animal cruelty. Okay, this protocol was published in 2017. This is the most complete publication. There are others which are more specific, okay, for dogs and cats, for different categories of animals, but this is a review with all the rationale. And this is the work of the master's and PhD thesis of Janaina Hammerschmidt. She's right here. So here we describe the rationale, the methods of application, and the type of report that should be produced when we talk about animal welfare assessment to help deciding cases of animal abuse or mistreatment. Okay, again, if you see here, is the same principle, okay, groups of indicators, nutritional comfort, health, and behavioral indicators. Okay, so this is for the first difficulty. Remember, the first difficulty we were talking about is the difficulty regarding the fact that physical exam is not enough to help in cases of suspicion of animal abuse. Now, the second difficulty is that just writing a report on the different levels of each indicator and then of each principle will not help a judge in deciding whether it was a case of animal abuse or not. So we also moved forward in this sense to include in our report a final statement where the veterinarian will say whether he or she believes that is a case of mistreatment or not. Okay, so this seems to be to us a very important part of the report. So how do we do that? In order to make a report there is readily available, understandable by lawyers, we need to know a little bit about the law, and we should be able to use the terminology that is in the law, because that's readily understandable by those who work in the law field. So of course this will vary according to the country, even though most countries tend to include some keywords which tend to be the same for animal protection, okay? In the case of Brazil, our major animal protection law is the federal law number 9605. This law was published in the year 1998, and it's known under the title of the Law of Environmental Crimes, okay? In its Article 32, it says specifically these words, okay? It's considered a crime to practice acts of abuse, mistreat, to hurt or to mutilate any animal, okay? Be it a wild or a domestic animal, native or exotic. So it is very, very wide in scope. If you think, for instance, of a situation where we have an invasive species, an exotic species, all individuals that pertain to that species are covered by law. They are protected. So whatever we decide to do with them, the way we do and how they perceive it, how much they suffer from our decisions, that is regulated by law. Okay? So our understanding is that a good report for cases of suspicion of animal abuse would have to use these words, okay, so that we are plainly clear for those who have to take the decision for a step forward, okay. And the terminology that we use in Brazil is mostly mistreatment, because mistreatment is a broader word in Portuguese than all the others here, okay? All the others could be understood as being also cases of mistreatment. Abuse in Portuguese is a very specific term that we use when animals or any individual is forced to work beyond what is reasonable, okay? That's abuse. It's to use in an inadequate way. Okay, so that's very specific, although I realize that in English the term abuse is also broader, okay? So what we decided is that any report should be able to be clear in stating whether there is a case of mistreatment or not in that animal welfare assessment report. So one of the things, of course, that we have to consider is the definition of animal mistreatment. What is animal mistreatment? And this is a very important topic because animal mistreatment has a different definition in terms of law terminology as compared to veterinary medicine. And the major difference that we have to keep in mind is that in veterinary medicine, abuse or mistreatment does not depend on intention, okay? It is totally dependent on the situation of the animal, okay? So from a veterinary medicine point of view, situation of mistreatment is defined by how the animal is and not by the intention of the guardian or the person responsible for the animal. And we use this classification, which was proposed by Macmillan in this book. And this is just a scheme that was inspired by the chapter in the book, the specific chapter in the book where he approaches animal mistreatment, okay? So there are two types of mistreatment, and in each of them there could be physical or psychological mistreatment. So what I would like to stress here is the important difference between the mistreatment that is characterized by abuse or aggression, which is a very obvious situation, and it's also a proactive situation. Someone does do something to hurt the animal. So this is very evident. But there is also a different type of mistreatment, which is by omission, is when a person does not provide for the animal something that should be provided, okay? And this is negligence, and this is the most frequent reason for animal mistreatment complaints and cases, okay? So it's very important to keep in mind that what is most common is the situations that are less evident. So this is a table from one of our publications, and now this was done with the data bank from the Environmental Military Police in the state of São Paulo. Remember, the state just further north from the state of Paraná. And what we saw there is just one example, because the data in the state of Paraná shows the same, and the published papers on this from the United States and also from Europe also show the same thing, okay? If you look here at these numbers, the numbers in parentheses are the percentage of cases, okay? And what you realize is that by far, negligence is the most common reason for animal abuse to be recognized, okay? So it's much more common than all the other cases, okay? So when we think about animal abuse, we tend to think, the image comes to mind of physical aggression or abuse, excessive use, but these are just a small percentage of animal abuse cases, okay? The most common is negligence, is failing to provide animals with food, water, good quality water, or even space to move, a minimum space to be healthy, okay? So this is very important. So again, thinking about the structure of our animal welfare assessment, now I would like to give you a little bit more detail on the protocol for expert report in animal welfare. So this is the overall structure of the protocol. We have, of course, the identification of the animal, and then we have the 4 groups of indicators, as we've said many times already, and I hope that by the end of this talk you know them by heart. So we have the indicators that will show us the state of the animal in relation to its nutrition, in relation to its health, to behavioral aspects, and also comfort, okay? So what we do for the report on animal abuse is that we further characterize with a qualifier, each group of indicator. Okay, after we measure all the indicators, we have to take a decision on whether that group was in an adequate level, a regular level, or in an inadequate level. Okay. And in the publication, there are details on how to do that. Okay. So after we have assessed the 4 groups of indicators, we will have 4 results. Okay. Each one in either one of these levels. Then once we have that, there is a final integration of all the results to check the welfare status of the animal, the overall welfare status of the animal, which will be in one of these 5 degrees, either very high, high, regular, low, or very low. Okay, so how is this done? So this is a synthesis of the integration of the welfare state, and essentially here are the results per each of the 4 groups. Okay, so if you have adequates for all four groups, of course the welfare state of the animal is very high. There is no problem, everything is ideal. Now if you have one group of indicators that is regular but all the others are adequate, which is this line here, we would say that the welfare state is high. So there is some adjustment there for one of the indicators group, but nothing major because it is regular, it's not inadequate. There's something missing, but not very serious. Now, if you have 2 or more groups that are classified as regular, well, you have more problems. But again, nothing is very, very pressing, okay, because it's not inadequate, it's just regular. So with 2 or more groups of indicators assessed as regular, provided all the others are adequate. So you have no group here which is classified as inadequate, okay? So in this case, if there are 2 or more that are regular, we say that the overall welfare state of the animal is regular. Now, when we start seeing groups of indicators for which the result was inadequate, then the situation starts to get bad. Okay, so if there is 1 or 2 groups where our conclusion was that it was in an inadequate state, the overall welfare state of the animal will be low, and if it's 3 or more, then it will be very low. Okay, and this is the situation that we should be concerned in terms of animal mistreatment. Something serious is happening here, and there must be a change. Okay, so this is the last page of the report, and I brought this from our field report, so it's also in Portuguese, but you can find that in English. It's just the way we organize the report to make sure that in the end we do that final step that we said is critical, which is transposing from veterinary medicine language to law language. Okay, so here is just checking to do the integration that we just saw in the previous slide. So here you have the groups of indicators and you check the ones that are inadequate. Remember, to be an ideal situation or a regular situation, none should be checked as inadequate. Okay, so depending on the integration, you will see what the overall welfare level of the animal is, and you're going to check here either very high, high, regular, low, or very low. And then you're going to check here whether there is animal mistreatment or not. Okay, so if the overall level of welfare is very low or low, this will be understood as animal mistreatment. Okay, and then you have the regular and then the high and very high welfare state overall. Okay, and here is the space for the professional to write in his or her own words the situation of the animal with a clear statement on whether there is or there is not a situation of animal mistreatment. Okay, so this should be very clear on this. Now, just some related topics. What we have once we start using the protocol for the assessment of animal welfare and decisions regarding animal mistreatment, we start realizing that the more we apply, the more mistreatment we may be able to see, because many situations are not obvious, as we said before, okay? So we are studying the application of the animal welfare assessment in terms of animal abuse and mistreatment recognition in other scenarios, okay? And one of these, of course, is the scenario of farm animals. So we are studying different situations. The first one that we've just published is on painful procedures in farm animals. Can this be considered animal abuse? So we have both the application of the protocol and also the opinion of both producers and society, and these results are very, very interesting. So this is the first publication, just came last month at the Animal Welfare Journal, and there are more to come, okay? Not only painful procedures, but what about the extreme confinement situations? This is a regular pig production farm in Brazil. Although Europe has moved forward already in this topic by forbidding this type of extreme confinement for both pigs and laying hens, in our country it's still allowed. So maybe by applying the animal welfare assessment protocol for mistreatment recognition, we can help this situation to change, because it is a very drastic situation. So this is just a slide to recognize and to thank the financial support that we got from CAPES, which is a federal institution to support science and universities in Brazil. And this is the project that helped us to make our protocol more solid and to have more examples and more papers on it. And it was a joint project run by us and the University of the State of São Paulo and a university in the state of Pernambuco. Pernambuco, I didn't point to you in the map, sorry, but it's a state in the northeast of Brazil, one of those wonderful places with beautiful beaches. That's Universidade Federal Rural de Pernambuco. And for this project, we also had the engagement as one of the proposers. So very important participation of the federal police, okay? So I've been reporting to you the joint work we've been doing with the environmental police in the state of Paraná and the environmental police in the state of São Paulo. But overall, for this project, we had the support of the federal police in Brazil, which is a major thing, very important to us. So as final considerations, I would like to say that the protocol tries to offer some kind of standardization and coherence for decisions. Standardization in the sense that everybody is really looking into all indicators that are believed to be important for this decision, and more coherent in the sense that if 5 of us, 10 of us go and do a report on the same situation, we should be able to reach the same conclusion, okay? And that was not happening at all. So we believe that having a protocol might help in terms of offering society some kind of professional opinion that is more substantiated in science. This, of course, especially when there is no physical aggression, because physical aggression is something that most people tend to agree upon. It's not difficult, let's say, to recognize. And it's also been our feeling that whenever there is a request for a report, it's much easier if you have a protocol to follow. It's much less challenging. Of course, it's not. The protocol will not predict all possible details that you're going to find on field. There are challenges still, and there are things that are not so objective. Okay, that's true. But what the protocol does is to organize everything else that is objective, that is that can be less challenging, provided that everybody agrees that should be there, should be evaluated. So we believe the protocol is doing that. So in the end, why are we doing all this? Well, we believe that there is a lot of suffering in the world for both humans and animals. We believe it is our task as veterinarians to help in recognizing and changing the situations that cause a lot of suffering to animals. So we believe that we can be part of their voices. And we also believe that we should be able to create situations of positive feelings for animals. And this is something animal welfare science is moving forward lately, and it's very pleasurable to study positive feelings in animals. So if animals are sentient, that's one of our duties to them. So I would like to recognize the wonderful participation of everybody in my group. So this is not, unfortunately, a picture, a recent picture. I don't have a very recent one, but it serves to show that it's teamwork. It's very complex, but it's doable if you have, motivation and the means to put all this energy into producing something that will be helping for us to make a better world. This is Janaina again. So I've been talking mostly about her work. This is Fabiana Stam. She's been working with the sheep welfare together with Vanessa. Vanessa is not in this picture. But anyways, I could name each one of them and their wonderful work. So I just thank everybody in the group. And this is my email address. I would be very happy to get some feedback from you if this lecture was useful somehow, if it should be deeper in some of the points, if there are doubts that I could help understanding, anything you would like to say. I would love to hear. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and once again, thank you very much, Professors Chiara and Angelo. And bye bye. Let's hope that this pandemic is over soon, and that soon we can all be together and doing many things together, research and also knowing our beautiful countries. So thank you very much. Bye bye.